Today, we delve deeper into the history of westward expansion following the U.S. Civil War, focusing on conflicts between settlers and the Cheyenne in Kansas and Nebraska during 1868 and 1869. These events unfolded amidst tensions stemming from land disputes and federal policies aimed at pacifying the Great Plains tribes. Following our discussion on the 1867 Union Pacific train line attack led by Chief Roman Nose, we now examine the role of the same chief and other leaders in subsequent raids. Our primary source for this account is the article The Cheyenne Barrier on the Kansas Frontier by Lonnie J. White, published in the spring 1962 issue of Arizona and the West. Between June 1868 and June 1869, the Cheyenne undertook significant efforts to resist the encroachment of settlers on their hunting grounds in western Kansas. The federal government, attempting to establish peace after the Civil War, negotiated the Treaty of the Little Arkansas in 1865 and the Medicine Lodge Treaty in 1867. While these treaties allocated reservations in Indian Territory and guaranteed hunting rights south of the Arkansas River, they were flawed in their implementation. Many tribal bands had not agreed to the terms, and the promised supplies were either delayed or insufficient. By the spring of 1868, discontent simmered among the Cheyenne and Arapaho, especially as resources dwindled and promised annuities failed to arrive. Younger Cheyenne warriors, led by chiefs such as Tall Bull and Little Robe, conducted raids on settlements, exacerbating tensions. An incident in Morris County near Council Grove saw these warriors clash with Kaw defenders, leaving a trail of destruction through the area. At the same time, the Cheyenne leader Black Kettle, known for his attempts at peace, sought to maintain friendly relations with U.S. authorities. However, not all Cheyenne groups shared his stance. Violent raids by other bands included attacks on settlers along Spillman Creek and the Solomon River. These incursions resulted in murders, assaults, and the capture of settlers, including Annie Morgan, Sarah White, and the Bell sisters. In response, U.S. cavalry units pursued the raiders, confronting them at locations such as Alonzo Schermerhorn's house. While the military thwarted some attacks, the raiders often evaded capture by dispersing. Reports of atrocities alarmed both local settlers and officials, prompting further military campaigns against the Cheyenne. The events of 1868 and 1869 highlight the tragic consequences of failed treaties and cultural misunderstandings during this era. They also underscore the desperation of the Plains tribes as they faced dwindling resources and increasing pressure from westward expansion. In response to reports of widespread destruction caused by Cheyenne raids, Kansas Governor Samuel J. Crawford conducted a swift inspection of the affected areas. On August 17, 1868, Crawford sent an urgent appeal to President Andrew Johnson, describing the devastation. Settlements over a 60-mile stretch between the Saline and Republican rivers had been abandoned, with the land left in ashes and soaked in blood. The Adjutant General of Kansas emphasized that the dire conditions of the settlers could only be fully grasped by witnessing them firsthand. President Johnson, recognizing the gravity of the situation, authorized General William T. Sherman, commander of the Division of the Missouri, to accept a Kansas Volunteer Cavalry Regiment for 6 months. Additionally, General Philip H. Sheridan was directed to use his forces to suppress the Cheyenne uprising. On August 22, Sherman ordered Sheridan to force the tribes south of the Kansas border, asserting that further tolerance of the raids was impossible. Sheridan established his headquarters at Fort Hays and began preparations for a decisive campaign to end the violence and compel the tribes to settle on reservations, as stipulated by the Medicine Lodge Treaty. By late autumn, Sheridan commanded 2,600 regular troops, supplemented by the Kansas Volunteer Regiment under Colonel Crawford, who had resigned as governor to lead the force. The campaign was delayed until winter, when tribal villages would be concentrated, and the weakened state of their horses would limit mobility. Meanwhile, Sheridan received congressional authorization to employ 50 experienced plainsmen as scouts. Major George A. Forsyth, leading this scout unit, was tasked with investigating minor raids near Fort Wallace. In mid-September, Forsyth scouts pursued a Cheyenne war party that had attacked a wagon train near Sheridan, Kansas, killing 2 teamsters and burning 40 wagons. Following the trail into eastern Colorado, Forsyth's command camped on a sandy island in the Arickaree Fork of the Republican River. At dawn on September 17, 1868, 6 warriors attempted to stampede the scouts' horses. Within minutes, hundreds of Cheyenne and Sioux launched a massive attack. Armed with Spencer repeating carbines, Forsyth's men repelled charge after charge, but suffered heavy casualties. After 3 days of fighting, Forsyth, realizing reinforcements were essential, sent 4 scouts to Fort Wallace 90 miles away. On the 9th day, Captain Lewis H. Carpenter's company of the 10th Cavalry, composed of black soldiers, arrived to rescue the beleaguered scouts. The skirmish left several dead, including Lieutenant Frederick H. Beecher and Dr. John H. Moores, while Major Forsyth was seriously wounded. Over 30 indigenous warriors were reported killed, including the renowned Cheyenne warrior Roman Nose, although tribal accounts later suggested higher casualties. Despite Forsyth's efforts, Cheyenne resistance persisted. In early autumn, a band attacked a wagon train traveling from New Mexico to Kansas, killing all teamsters, burning the wagons, and taking Clara Blinn and her 2-year-old son captive. On October 13th, another large group raided the Solomon Valley, killing 4 settlers and wounding 2 others. The era was marked by fear and violence. As one pioneer grimly noted, one would not be surprised to wake up and find himself dead and scalped. The Solomon Valley raid marked the final reported Cheyenne attack of the fall of 1868, as the onset of colder weather forced the warriors to retreat to their winter camps. During this time, General Philip Sheridan prepared his troops for an unprecedented winter campaign against the Southern Plains tribes. To prevent harm to peaceful bands, General William T. Sherman ordered all cooperative Native groups to concentrate along the Canadian River south of Arkansas. With this measure in place, Sheridan's forces moved forward. The main thrust of Sheridan's campaign relied on the 7th Cavalry under Lieutenant Colonel George A. Custer, which marched from Fort Hays via Camp Supply into Indian Territory. 2 additional columns supported this movement, one from New Mexico and the other from Fort Lyon, Colorado. Custer's regiment, consisting of 11 companies, reached Camp Supply ahead of the other forces. On November 23rd, they began following a fresh trail leading toward the Washita River. Before dawn on November 27, 1868, Thanksgiving Day, Custer scouts located a Cheyenne village led by Black Kettle in the Washita Valley. Orders were given for a silent approach, with the soldiers refraining from even stamping their feet against the bitter cold. At daybreak, the regiment launched a surprise attack, accompanied by bugle calls and their regimental song, Gary Owen. The assault on the sleeping village was fierce, lasting for hours as the warriors sought cover in the ravine, but were repeatedly flushed out. Over 100 Cheyenne were killed, including Black Kettle, while more than 50 women and children were taken captive. The soldiers destroyed lodges, supplies, and the tribe's pony herd. As the day progressed, Custer learned that Black Kettle's village was part of a larger encampment stretching 15 miles along the Washita. Recognizing the risks of a broader engagement, he ordered a cautious retreat by nightfall. The regiment returned to Camp Supply on December 3rd, where they were reviewed by Sheridan. The Washita engagement dealt a significant blow to Cheyenne resistance on the Kansas frontier. Sheridan praised the operation, describing it as a decisive strike against one of the most villainous bands responsible for prior atrocities on the Saline and Solomon rivers. Throughout the winter, Sheridan's forces continued operations around Fort Cobb, gathering surviving tribes on reservations near the Washita Valley. However, resistance flared again in the spring of 1869. These raids were carried out not by Black Kettle's band, but by Cheyenne Dog soldiers under Tall Bull. Having wintered along the Powder River, they moved stealthily into northwestern Kansas. In May 1869, Tall Bull's warriors launched a series of attacks. On Covert Creek in Osborne County, they ambushed 4 hunters, who narrowly escaped. Later that month, the Dog soldiers attacked a Kansas Pacific Railroad work crew near Fossil Creek Station, killing 2 laborers, wounding 4 others, and sabotaging the tracks, causing a train derailment. The raiders then turned their attention to settlements, killing 6 men and 1 woman and capturing 2 boys in Republic County. Additional raids on Spillman Creek and the Saline River resulted in the capture of Mrs. Susan Alderdice, her baby, and Mrs. Maria Weechel. By late May, the dog soldiers roamed freely in northwestern Kansas. A report from Waterville noted their movements north and west of the Republican River, where they targeted hunters along the Little Blue River. Raids persisted into June. On June 3rd, 4 settlers inspecting farmland on White Rock Creek were brutally killed. Days later, 6 hunters were massacred at the creek's mouth, and on June 9th, at Scandia, a man and a child were slain. Despite these attacks, settlers became increasingly armed and vigilant, reducing the frequency of raids. A notable skirmish occurred on June 19th, 15 miles west of Sheridan, where 50 Cheyenne attacked a surveying party. Armed settlers repelled the assault, killing 4 warriors and suffering 2 casualties themselves. To protect outlying settlements from further attacks, Kansas Adjutant General W.S. Morehouse stationed militia at key locations, including Plum Creek, Fisher Creek, Spillman Creek, the Saline, Beaver Creek, the Republican, and Turkey Creek near the Little Arkansas River. While the state government contributed to defending the frontier, the U.S. Army ultimately led efforts to confront the Cheyenne dog soldiers. Upon learning of the raids, General Philip Sheridan directed commanders at all posts within his jurisdiction to dispatch cavalry detachments to scout the affected areas and locate hostile camps. In response, Major Eugene A. Carr departed Fort McPherson, Nebraska, on June 7, 1869, with 8 companies of the 5th Cavalry and 3 companies of Pawnee Scouts under Major Frank North. Their mission was to search the headwaters of the Republican River near the mouth of Dog Creek. Carr's troops patrolled both sides of the Republican River, covering a swath 10 miles wide, and marched nearly 300 miles before locating Tall Bull's dog soldier camp. On July 11, 1869, Carr discovered the Cheyenne dog soldiers, alongside some Sioux allies, encamped in a valley along the South Platte River in northeastern Colorado. Acting swiftly, the cavalry launched a mounted charge that took the camp by surprise. The Indians, caught off guard, were unable to secure their weapons or mounts in time. In the ensuing battle, 52 warriors, including Tall Bull, were killed and 17 women and children were taken prisoner. The survivors fled into the surrounding terrain, pursued by cavalry for 4 miles. Troopers burned items they could not carry away and rounded up stray animals. This decisive engagement marked the end of the Republican River Expedition and effectively concluded Sheridan's campaign, which had begun a year earlier to suppress indigenous resistance in western Kansas. With the Cheyenne subdued, the Kansas frontier was finally open to large-scale settlement. By 1870, the region experienced a population surge, with settlers rushing into the fertile plains. Within 2 years, settlements extended as far as the Colorado border. This federal military action not only pacified the region, but also showcased its potential to prospective homesteaders heading west. The events of 1868 and 1869, chronicled in Lonnie J. White's The Cheyenne Barrier on the Kansas Frontier, 1868 to 1869, published in Journal of the Southwest, 1962, highlight a tumultuous period in the history of westward expansion. This article provided an overview of the Cheyenne resistance and Sheridan's military response, but left some details unexplored, such as the fate of Sarah White and Anna Morgan, who were captured during the raids. A subsequent account, titled Winter War Against the Indians, published in the Arizona Republic on April 1, 1945, sheds light on the captivity of Sarah White, a 17-year-old taken during a Cheyenne raid. Sarah's family had migrated from Wisconsin to Kansas, settling in Buffalo Township along Granny Creek. Her father, Benjamin White, and her brother Jack were killed by Cheyenne warriors while cutting hay near the Republican River. Back at the family's log cabin, Sarah and her mother were confronted by 6 Cheyenne who appeared in the doorway. Although frightened, Sarah watched as her mother calmly invited the warriors inside and prepared a meal for them. Pretending to be friendly, the Cheyenne ate voraciously, masking their true intentions. After the initial meal and deceptive calm in Sarah White's family cabin, the Cheyennes silently filed out. Suddenly, one of them turned back, seized Sarah, and carried her outside. She screamed and fought, but another warrior mounted a pony, and Sarah was handed up to him. They rode swiftly away, leaving Sarah's mother running after them, arms outstretched and screaming in despair. The warriors didn't stop until they reached their camp on Buffalo Creek. By then, Sarah was faint with fear and hunger. That evening, another band of the same tribe arrived. At the camp, leading her father's team of horses. It was then Sarah learned the devastating truth. Her father and brother Jack had been killed, and she assumed her mother and the rest of her family had likely met the same fate. Fearing pursuit, the Cheyenne camped only briefly before moving again. Along the way, Sarah found an old newspaper, which she tore into small pieces, scattering them as a desperate trail for rescuers to follow. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah lost track of time and direction, knowing only by the sun that they were traveling west. The journey was grueling, and Sarah became numb with exhaustion and fear. When the mountain peaks came into view, she realized they had traveled far from her Kansas home. Winter set in with bitter cold, and Sarah's clothing, now in tatters, provided little protection. Food became scarce. The Cheyenne killed and ate their dogs, and some stolen children were abandoned to freeze along the trail. One day, Sarah encountered another white girl in the camp, a young bride who had been captured during the same raid on the Solomon Valley. Only 2 years older than Sarah, the girl's blue eyes were wide with grief and terror, and her unkempt yellow hair fell to her shoulders. The two captives, treated as slaves, were forced to chop wood and carry water, their hands becoming calloused and their backs scarred from beatings by jealous Cheyenne women. Their feet, protected only by buckskin moccasins, were frostbitten in the relentless blizzards that swept across the plains. Brave and resourceful, Sarah hatched an escape plan. She had picked up enough of the Cheyenne dialect to understand bits of conversation and deduced that they were south of the Arkansas River, near Fort Dodge. One night, Sarah and the young bride, Anna Morgan, slipped away from the camp in bitter cold. They struggled through deep snowdrifts to reach the river, where only a strip of ice separated them from the fort's safety. However, their absence was quickly discovered, and the two were recaptured, severely punished, and returned to the Cheyenne camp. During this time, most Cheyenne warriors were raiding Kansas and Colorado, while their families remained in winter quarters in the sheltered Washita River Valley, near the western edge of Indian Territory. Sarah and Anna endured their captivity with resilience, though Anna despaired, staring blankly into the winter wasteland. Sarah, however, refused to give up hope. Unknown to the captives, Kansas Governor Crawford had petitioned President Andrew Johnson for assistance, prompting General Philip Sheridan to organize a rescue mission. At Camp Supply, Sheridan prepared a winter campaign, an unprecedented move, as Native American raids typically occurred in summer, with tribes retreating to winter quarters to survive on supplies. Governor Crawford personally joined the 19th Kansas Volunteer Cavalry, and Sheridan sent Lieutenant Colonel George A. Custer with the 7th Cavalry and famed scout California Joe to locate the Cheyenne villages. On November 27, 1868, California Joe spotted the Cheyenne encampment from a hilltop overlooking Washita. Custer divided his troops into 4 columns and launched a surprise attack at dawn. Despite freezing temperatures, over a foot of snow, and a fierce north wind, the soldiers advanced to bugle calls and the regimental band's spirited rendition of Gary Owen. The attack overwhelmed the Cheyenne, leaving 103 dead, including Black Kettle, while the remaining warriors fled. Although victorious at the Battle of Washita, Custer's forces were disappointed to find that Sarah White and Anna Morgan were not among the captives. Sheridan's troops pursued the fleeing Cheyenne down the Washita River. On the present-day site of Fort Sill, several chiefs, including Satana, Lone Wolf, and Little Raven, surrendered. However, the 1,200 Cheyenne warriors holding Sarah and Anna had escaped westward. Sheridan dispatched Custer with the 7th Cavalry and the 19th Volunteer Regiment to rescue the captives. The troops faced grueling conditions, temperatures below zero, barren terrain, and dwindling rations. For 2 weeks, they followed the Cheyenne's trail, always finding themselves a day or two behind. The saga of Sarah White's captivity and eventual rescue remains one of the most inspiring and poignant chapters in the history of westward expansion. After months of relentless pursuit, Lieutenant Colonel George A. Custer and his cavalry caught up with the Cheyenne on the banks of the Sweetwater River in present-day Wheeler County, Texas. Facing 1,200 Cheyenne warriors, Custer's 1,000 soldiers stood firm as the Cheyenne raised a white flag, initiating a tense standoff. Custer summoned 4 Cheyenne chiefs, Dull Knife, Fat Bear, Big Head, and Medicine Arrow, and demanded the release of Sarah White and Anna Morgan. The chiefs, denying the captives' presence, were promptly arrested. Custer issued a chilling ultimatum. If the girls were not delivered by sunset the following day, the chiefs would be hanged. As the deadline approached, the Cheyenne made a dramatic concession. Scouts appeared on distant bluffs in a sequence of signals, culminating in the arrival of 2 figures, Sarah White and Anna Morgan, frail and haggard from months of captivity. Wearing thin flour sacks and buckskin moccasins, the 2 girls walked arm in arm, visibly aged beyond their years by their ordeal. Officers quickly wrapped them in coats, and they were escorted to General Custer amidst a solemn silence, broken only by the soft strains of the 7th Cavalry Band playing Home Sweet Home. After their return to Fort Dodge and reunion with their families, Sarah White began the long process of healing. Despite her outward calm and determination, the trauma left lasting scars. She channeled her energy into work, teaching school, aiding settlers, and caring for her community, all while raising 8 children with her husband, Civil War veteran Yo Brooks. Sarah lived to the age of 88, spending her later years near the site of her abduction, now marked by White Creek, named in honor of her father. Sarah White's legacy endures as a testament to resilience and courage in the face of unimaginable hardship. Her story is retold in the whispers of White Creek and the rustling prairie grasses, cherished by her descendants and remembered as a vital part of Kansas's pioneer history. This episode highlights the broader conflict between the U.S. Army and the Cheyenne during the late 1860s, including earlier raids by Dog soldiers and the infamous 1867 attack on the Union Pacific Railroad led by Roman Nose. It also draws attention to the internal divisions among the Cheyenne, with some bands resisting settlers while others sought peace. For those seeking a deeper understanding of Sarah White's story, the 2023 book Captured, The True Accounts of Sarah White and the Cheyenne Asterisk by Beth Lynn White offers a compelling narrative. A descendant of Sarah's family, the author provides a personal connection to this remarkable history. As part of our mission, we delve into overlooked historical accounts, keeping them alive through direct readings from historical sources, where your contributions help sustain our commitment to preserving actual history.